Hello, boys and girls of Credit Union Land, and welcome to episode 78 of the CUInsight Experience. This episode is brought to you by our friends at PSCU. As the nation's premier payments CUSO, PSCU proudly supports the success of more than 1,500 credit unions. My name is Randy Smith. I'm one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and it is my job on the show to have conversations with the best and the brightest of the credit union community. I get to pick their brains and see if we can't find a few nuggets that we can all learn from. My guest on today's show is Marsha Majors. Marsha is the president and CEO of U.S. Eagle Federal Credit Union in New Mexico. Multiple people had told me that Marsha would be an amazing guest on the show, and I will tell you, they were right. This was an awesome conversation that I truly enjoyed. So much good in it and so much that each one of us can learn from. We talked about how Marsha has led her credit union not only through the global pandemic that we've all been sharing this experience on, but also through the George Floyd murder and the protests that followed, how she has communicated with her team and the members about the value and the vision of the credit union. I really think that communication style is something that we can all learn from. I get the feeling everybody knows U.S. Eagle's why from Marsha's communication style. The leadership section of this show was just great. Marsha shared with us her style, her leadership lessons learned along the way, the importance to her of mentoring, or should I say teaching. And, she works with up and coming women leaders as well as young people throughout the community and inside her credit union. As always, we have a ton of fun with the rapid fire questions to wrap up the show. As I said in the start, I enjoyed this conversation. I really do think you will too. Again, I look forward to being able to move about this country again, hopefully soon, and I hope my path gets to cross with Marsha's and we can pick up this conversation in person. So, without further ado, I give you my conversation with Marsha Majors. Enjoy. Marsha, welcome to the show.
Hello, Randy. Thank you so much for having me today.
I've been looking forward to this conversation. That everybody's been awfully busy here the last few months, so I appreciate you taking the time today to be on. Even since we first started talking about you coming on the show, things keep changing. So we were going to talk. I'm sure we still will. We're all going through this shared experience called a global pandemic that most of us probably hadn't been through before in our life. And now, over the past week, we've also seen protests from coast to coast and just a lot of emotion that's out there. The question that I, was really looking forward to posing to you was, you lead a large organization. You've got this great credit union. How do you, as the leader, manage through times like these, provide the word that I keep thinking of is that kind of like safe space for all employees with so many different things going on right now?
Yeah, I'm so glad that you are asking that question. Not only is it the COVID pandemic, but we have the current environment in our country where I believe we're dealing with two pandemics right now. I have taken the opportunity to reach out and send communications to my organization. Early on in the COVID-19, as we were adjusting to that, I continue to hold intimate conversations with my staff, allowing them an opportunity to converse, not just with me, but others on my executive team. So we've managed through the COVID piece, followed that with what's happening now in regards to the current state of affairs in our country. I sent a communication to my organization addressing it because I feel like it's an area where some folks may not feel as comfortable initiating a conversation. I happen to be African American myself, so I wanted to make it a safe place for my staff to, if they wanted to talk with me or whatever the case may be, to let them know where I stood as their leader in the organization and to allow an avenue for them to speak on it. I actually took that a little bit further after communicating that to my staff. I felt compelled to also communicate to our membership. That's how passionate I was about where we are today and our responsibility basically in all of this, not only personally, but professionally as well. So that's the avenue that I've taken in regards to continuing to be engaged with my staff, our members, and our community as a whole.
Gosh, I appreciate that. And thank you for speaking on that. I've been thinking back to when I first started the podcast a little over a year ago now. And one of my very first guests was, and I reached directly out to him, was Maurice Smith. And the reason why was he had just written about the 8th Cooperative Principle. And it to me, I mean, credit unions come from a place of social change, right?
Absolutely.
Like and so for us to have, and you know, I am a white male. I am learning about and trying to learn my best about the privilege that I have. And that being said, to be in this cooperative system to help to, want to push forward change, I greatly appreciate you saying to create that space where questions can be asked, and we can all hopefully do much, much better, because that needs to happen. So thank you again. I greatly appreciate that. This was really a question that I'd sent you based on the pandemic, but I guess just in general, do you think this will change the way that members interact with the credit unions going forward? So much is changing here over the past few months,
Well, if we're speaking strictly from COVID-19, my hope is that it will. I know most organizations or financial institutions have strived for many years to transition our members to the more efficient channels of delivering service. And what, at least in my organization, has been something we strive to do for several years was a transition that was overnight, pretty much. So I hope that they will continue to see the value in those other delivery channels and reach a level of trust. I find that maybe they didn't trust those channels as much, and now they've had an opportunity to see that it's okay. My records are still the same, whether I'm on the phone or using the online channel. So my hope is that we'll continue to see members, maybe not so much in our lobbies, but a better balance.
Has that been something, have you had to educate folks on that, like in kind of quick order over the past month or two?
We've kicked that up a little bit. We continually like to have something out on our website providing tutorials, and our staff is really encouraged to always take the opportunity to share with our members other ways of doing business with us.
Well, that's fantastic. I on a recent conversation, and I will tell you, my mother listens to the podcast. Her biggest thing was she was like, I wish I could deposit checks. I'm like, I guarantee you can at your credit union. So I went to their website. It's in Detroit, and they had a nice YouTube video of it and everything. And so I showed her that, and she still a day later was like, thanks, I think I'll have to go into the branch to have them show me how. I'm like, that's not necessary.
Yeah, at the start though, right?
Right, it is, but so I've been thinking a lot about that just, as we've been going through all of this. Is there something that you think credit unions need to fundamentally change to stay relevant or even capitalize during these times that we're going through, to be, quite honestly, people's that financial center, like the choice financial center, over, say, a bank or all the other options and disruptors that are out there?
Yeah, when I saw that as a question that you plan to ask, I really couldn't arrive at what we would necessarily need to change. I believe that it's more of continuing to advocate for ourselves. I think we need to be louder in what it is we're trying to do. We may talk a little bit more in our conversation, but there was an opportunity for my organization a few years back to take over a space that a local bank, or I should say a national bank, had held for decades here in Albuquerque. And we were able to take over the space, and it happened to be on the tallest building in our city.
Okay.
You can see it from all directions. And so being successful in taking over that space and having our name prominent on the tallest building in our state, I felt like, at least here in New Mexico, as credit unions, it wasn't just a win for U.S. Eagle. It was a win for credit unions in our state and across the country, because I had a sense of, we finally made it. We're at the top here, so let's leverage that and continue to share our story around it.
Absolutely. Oh, I love hearing that. There was something else that I was really excited to talk to you about, and it was something that Renee from the African American Credit Union Coalition had brought up to me. She was the one who was like, you need to get Marsha on the show. I was like, yes, please. But then I was doing a little bit of research. You came up through the credit union to become the president and CEO. That is, often, and I think even talking to friends as they're kind of moving up through their career, they often feel that they have to leave to get to that next step. Was that something that I guess multiple questions here, but was that something as you were going through that you were thinking about that you might have to leave? Or, how did that, do you have any tips for people who love their credit union and would hope to stay there but want to move on up?
Wow, that is a great question. I'd have to say it's somewhat unique to the individual. For me, I had worked for my organization 1 year initially, and I didn't necessarily think it was the right place for me.
Okay.
I had actually made plans to leave the organization, and my CEO at that time really reached out to me and had an in-depth conversation with me regarding what I wanted to do going forward. He became one of my first mentors in the credit union organization. And so he invested in me. And so from there, I thought it was important for me not to abandon all the effort that this individual had put into me and growing me in the organization. So I took advantage of that. All of the learning opportunities. I made sure to let folks know what it is I wanted to be able to do and ask for their insight as far as how I could better position myself to do some of these things. There's a lot of patience, I think, that comes along with that. Some folks really want to be in roles immediately, but you have to earn your stripes, so to speak. You have to prove your capabilities and be able to show that you can have an impact and work hard to get there. But the one thing I will say is that in doing all of that, it's so important to stay true to yourself and know your worth. And as I said before, continue to seek and take advantage of opportunities that may be very obvious in your organization. And sometimes they're not. Sometimes you have to find them on your own.
That's great advice there. Do you mind me asking, what was it that first year that was making you think you needed to move on?
Well, I had worked in the savings and loan industry briefly, okay. And the credit union industry was brand new. I came in working in the retirement side of the organization and just didn't quite get it that first year. And had honestly decided that I was going to take another position, had found another position when that CEO took an interest in me. So that's where I started, and the rest now is history.
Well, we're glad they did, and you're still here. So the last question in this section is, if you were to sit down a year from now, break out that crystal ball. I know it's a tough question right now, but what are you most proud of that you and your team at US Eagle have accomplished over the next 12 months?
Wow, that's a great question as well. I would probably have to say how we've managed through this COVID pandemic. We had the benefit of having tested remote workers already.
Okay.
So we were a little ahead of the game there compared to some of our peers. The way we were able to quickly deploy folks was just amazing to me. We had a structure that we built in 24 hours where we had close to 70% of our folks off-site.
Wow.
And that took great organization. It took great commitment to making sure that everyone knew their task and their role. And the communication continued throughout. And at the end of the day, we came together and said, okay, yeah, we can open tomorrow and still serve our members. So I'm extremely proud of that. We've never been tested to that degree. Yeah. I compared this situation to the year 2000 when there was a lot of energy around, what's going to happen when the calendar rolls over, and all this preparation was done, and then there was nothing as a result of that. But this time there was something, and we learned from those years and brought that forward. So I'm extremely proud of how we rallied around each other as a team, as an organization, and we'll have that story to tell.
That's fantastic. I'd like to move on to the second part of the show. It's my favorite part, but it's all about the leadership and life hacks. Many of these questions are scratch my own itch questions. Okay. There's so many smart folks at the credit union space. I love to learn from people. So what inspired you originally to take the gig as president and CEO of US Eagle Federal Credit Union?
Well, actually, I obviously was working under a prior CEO at the time, and I had worked for a couple of CEOs at that particular time, and I really had no plans whatsoever to serve beyond my predecessor. And so I was actually thinking of what am I going to do next in my work life. After having some conversations, not only with my board of directors, who were extremely supportive, some of the team members that I worked with day in and day out, a lot of self-reflection and conversations, obviously, with my family, because there's a great deal of commitment that goes along with this responsibility. I was able to then arrive at, yes, I feel like there's an opportunity for me to make a difference here. I had a platform to further mentor girls and women and show them some of the possibilities that are out there. So that was the inspiration for me to take on this role.
You mentioned, talking to your family and others around you, it's a big responsibility. So you obviously saw what the other CEOs that you'd worked for had to go through, but once you're actually in that chair, has the inspiration changed once you actually took the position?
I won't say that it's changed. I will say that some days I ask myself, what were you thinking?
I think we all have those.
Yeah, I do. I honestly do. But in the grand scheme of things, I get past that rather quickly because I enjoy the mission. And when I keep my eye on that, it makes it all worth it. So the inspiration continues to be what we're doing for our communities as a whole. And so each day, I feel like if I'm making a difference, I will continue to be inspired by that.
Beautiful. How would you describe your leadership style?
Well, I like to lead by example. I believe it's now referred to, I guess, as servant leadership. That's putting people first, facilitating the open communication, and really empowering others to be the best that they can be.
This is one of those scratch my own itch questions now. Many servant leaders talk about also leading by example, and a lot of the times to get to the place that you are, sitting in the CEO chair, you were probably a go-getter, right? Like who did it themselves. Was bringing other people in with you, with trusting in others as a leader, something that you always had? Or was there like that uncomfortable, like I know for myself, like as my team grew, I was kind of uncomfortable with letting other people do stuff that I had always done. So, I wouldn't say I was the best delegator, I guess,
Yeah, so. I would think that most people that transition from a doer to the leader, there's always an element of letting go.
Yep.
And I am in that group as well.
Yeah.
I struggled for a period of time. I got to the point where I was able to begin to trust and verify. And the more that I saw that folks could take the directive and run with it and check in when they needed to, or just to say, am I on the right track? It helped ease some of that relinquishing of what I once controlled. So yeah, I think that's just part of what you have to go through.
I tend to agree with you. As a leader, is there something that your team has heard you say so many times they can finish your sentence?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it comes in several variations, but it really is, we're here for one purpose. That's to serve our members, to serve one another well, and to serve our communities. There's a phrase that one of my mentors, former CEO, would always share with us. And sometimes he delivered it in a sarcastic way, but we all knew the intention. And it was, God forbid we serve the member. And that has lived with me forever. And we never lose sight of why we're really here. So that's something that anyone in the organization will know. Members first, let's take care of our people, and then we can better take care of our communities.
One of the things that I noticed and came up in conversation quite a bit the first season too was the idea that, as the CEO can sometimes be a little bit of a lonely island between the board and the rest of the team. And sometimes you're the one, the buck stops with you. You have to make those difficult decisions. Is that something that you always had inside you to kind of to be able to do that? Or is that something that you had to, I guess, cultivate over time as well? And any tips for maybe somebody who's going up the ranks right now?
Yeah. I have to say, with all honesty, I was born under the sign of Libra, which loves and requires balance.
Okay. Yeah.
So sometimes that can get in the way. But I adopted many years ago a methodology that someone else, I can't recall who that was, that shared that, but it really is the 10-10 methodology.
Okay.
Which is really asking myself the question of what is the impact or the consequence of this decision in 10 minutes, 10 months, or 10 years from now. And that really forces me to systematically go through a thought process, and the answers usually tell me what I need to know.
Yeah.
And then I can make a decision and explain the why behind it to those that will eventually be impacted by it. And it's worked well for me. So that's my go-to now to make sure that things don't get stalled and I can move forward.
That is some great advice. Is there a common myth about being a leader that you would want to debunk?
I would have to say that somehow when you become a leader, you've made it. I don't know what that necessarily means, but the work gets harder the further up the ladder you go. Oftentimes people feel that you don't have as much responsibility, but the responsibility is so much greater. The work of the entire organization is on your shoulders, and it's not easier, it's harder.
People who listen to the podcast, I've said it multiple times that when we started CUInsight, when we hired our first employee, I felt like my entire job changed. It was now like feeding families and stuff. It wasn't just posting credit union news anymore.
Exactly.
I get what you're saying there. When you think back to earlier in your career, was there a mistake that you made, or now that you are a leader of people, is there a mistake that you see young leaders make often?
Well, I think we've all at some point made a few mistakes. I think they're not a bad thing necessarily if you learn from them. I've made a few hiring mistakes over my career that you live to regret, but you learn from those mistakes and move forward. Now, from my standpoint, when it's referring to some of the young leaders, sometimes the position or the authority that comes with their role can sometimes overshadow the purpose. And I don't want to say it's necessarily egos, but the responsibility can be so great sometimes, and you can get lost in the power of that and lose sight of the purpose. And I feel like just by the nature of our industry, that's very counterproductive to who we are.
Absolutely. Yep. That's a good one. I'm sitting here nodding my head at that. Has there been a piece of advice or a life lesson that you received that you find yourself going back to over in your career?
Just really staying true to yourself. Stick with your convictions, know your capabilities. And if you have a gap or a deficiency, fill it.
Yeah.
Fill it with someone that has that expertise.
That is great advice that it seems like sometimes it takes a little maturity to learn. So over time.
Sometimes you want to believe that you can do everything.
Yeah, that's the truth. One of the things I noticed in the first season, and you mentioned it earlier, is that mentors have played an important part in people's lives and their careers. You've already mentioned not only the mentors that some of the mentors that maybe you've had coming up, but also you did mention that like part of taking the position was that you could mentor other women. The value of mentorship. How has it helped your career, and I can ask you this: how are you paying it forward?
Yeah. Well, I like to take advantage of working with some of the women leaders on my executive team, those in other levels of management in our organization. I participate with the New Mexico Global Women's Leadership Network. I've had the opportunity to work with young girls in sharing the responsibilities of what leadership looks like. We bring in students from local schools where I have an opportunity there as well. So I really enjoy that, especially when it's involving young people.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. You can hear your voice light up as you talk about it. Good stuff there. Was there ever, you mentioned, the early on, maybe not thinking the credit union was the place for you, but has there been maybe a point in your career where you kind of had that self-doubt, felt lost, and do you have any hacks for people out there that are maybe feeling stuck on how to get through that?
Well, I'm going to share with you my most recent self-doubt, and that was in regards to a communication I sent out around the current state of affairs in our country. I sent a communication not only to our staff first and decided to share that with our membership. It was around diversity and how we take care of one another as a organization. And I did have momentarily some self-doubt around that, not knowing what the potential consequence of or responses.
Yeah, the reaction. Yeah.
The reaction to that would be. But I guess for me, if you believe in something, you feel it's worth it, then it's worth the risk. So again, I think you have to really support what it is you're trying to do or convey, and be confident in what it is you're saying.
Do you mind me asking, how was the response?
Well, this is just barely 24. It's not even quite 24 hours ago.
Okay. Yep.
Thus far, it's been positive.
That's good to hear.
It's been positive. I've heard from several of our members and very encouraging, and they're grateful that their credit union has decided to speak out on it.
I am with you. That's for sure. I'm glad to hear that your members that's the response you're getting as well. Sometimes we put ourselves out there and we don't know what it's going to be, right? So inside or outside of credit unions, has there been a moment of accomplishment that you had that you just look back on, kind of that one that pops into your head that just makes you smile and go, I did good that day. I'm grateful for that experience.
Wow. I'd have to go to some of our community work that we're doing. We've been involved with a local food project for, at least my involvement has been 20 years or more.
Oh, wow.
And we had an opportunity last fall to build a food garden for them to provide fresh food. And so that, as a collective effort for our organization and what it's done for not just the food bank themselves, but for those that we serve there. And so we're extremely proud of that. I mean, we focus a lot on what we do for our in-house members, but when your community allows you an opportunity to do even more, and you can see the benefits of that, that's huge.
Before we move on to the last part of the show, I do want to be respectful of your time. If you have a free day, there's nothing on the calendar, what passions do you have outside of credit unions? What does, Marsha do to recharge and that work-life integration look like to you?
Oh, wow. I said earlier how much I love working with young people. So I'm always looking for those opportunities, whether it's with a group of students or if it's with family members that are young. I'm always trying to surround myself with those young folks because I learn from them.
Absolutely.
We have a junior board within our credit union that has been in place for probably 4 years now.
Okay.
And so I like engaging with those folks because they're always coming up with fresh ideas and things for us to think about because they're the next generation. I'm very motivated and enthusiastic about working continuously with young folks. I also enjoy music of all sorts, played the piano for many years, and really love to take vacations. Cruising was one of the big ones, not so
We're not doing that now, are we? No.
But yeah, those are really things that I look forward to.
A follow-up question on the junior board. I think that's such an amazing idea. What was the motivation? Was it to bring more, talent? It's almost like a farm system for maybe your board in the future, right? So it's
You're exactly right. Part of it is to share with these up-and-coming young individuals what it looks like to serve on a board.
Yeah.
They are very, very structured. We also task them with establishing some community involvement initiatives. We task them with product ideas or enhancements. We engage them throughout the organization. Some of them we also bring on as interns.
Okay.
We teach them, the value of volunteering. We provide them with an opportunity to learn the financial world and what our mission is all about. So we're excited because we have wins all the way around.
That is fantastic. I'm so intrigued by this. Do you actively have to recruit people for this, or is it now like an application process? Or
It is an application process.
Okay. Yeah.
We've had as many as 13, I believe.
Wow.
serving on the board from a variety of high schools and into early college age.
Oh, I think that is so great. Thanks for sharing that. The last part of the show, the rapid fire questions. The questions are rapid. Your answers do not have to be. What was Marsha like in high school? And do you remember the first time you got into memorable trouble?
I wish I had a better story to share with you. I was a pretty steady student. Nothing glamorous or exciting. I will say that I was very involved in the typical high school activities, the school clubs, yearbook, gymnastics, things of that nature. But when it comes to the trouble side of that, didn't really go there.
You steered clear.
No, I knew the consequences that would await me at home had I done so. So I tried to stay clear of that. But yeah, pretty average.
That's good, and I'm sure your parents thank you for that. Most of us stumbled into a career in credit unions. You mentioned starting on the savings and loan side. What did you want to be when you grew up, when you were in high school?
Oh, that was easy. I wanted to teach.
Okay.
I've talked a lot about young people.
You have. I was going to say, It seems like you've found a way to merge both of those.
I have. But I will say that teaching young people, the ages have declined. I think I'm more inclined to work with those that are elementary.
Okay.
I think there's a little more openness to learning things, and they're just starting to talk back, I guess, is the best way to describe that. But I don't think I abandoned that role. I think I've still had the opportunity to do that and to accomplish that by way of providing the financial literacy that the credit union offers across the organization and in our community. So that's teaching as well. I'm happy.
You're still teaching.
Yes.
You got to do that. So do you have any daily routines that if you don't do, your day just feels off?
Not really. For me, it's pretty simple. I pause just to speak gratitude for the day.
Yep.
Nothing fancy, just glad for the day.
As people that listen know, I journal every morning, and that is a major part of what my journaling is just a little bit of gratitude in the morning.
Yeah. Goes a long way.
It sure does. If I don't do it, that thing that makes me feel off. So the random question, you said you like music, you played the piano. What's the best album of all time? That one you can listen to without skipping a song.
Yeah, that's not that easy to call out. I would have to say it would have to be a mixtape for me.
Okay.
Of Anthology by Maze featuring Frankie Beverly.
Okay.
And anything by Sade.
Gee, that's some good
stuff. Those together, and I'm good.
You're just chilling. That is awesome. I'm a reader. Jill and I have a stack of books in our house that have been in many. That stack keeps growing because people recommend them to us all the time. Is there a book that either you've gifted others or that you just think everybody should read?
Oh, wow. From a professional standpoint, I would say Who Moved My Cheese?
Okay. Yep.
That one continues to be relative. And then from a personal standpoint, recently gifted Michelle Obama's Becoming.
Yes.
I think there are lessons in there. Leadership, parenting, just all empowering. So,
I bought that book and read it, and then also got the audiobook because I wanted to kind of go back and listen while I was walking and stuff. Yeah. So I'm with you. I'm ready for President Obama's book to come out too. As you've gotten older, what's become more important to you? And is my favorite part of this question, what's become less important?
Wow. I think less important. I think people are most important. I mean, you have to make time for that. Sometimes, in our crazy world, we're so busy being busy.
Yep.
We have to stop and smell the roses, as they say, which, in this COVID-19 has really forced us to do more of that. And as bad as things may have been, that's the one good thing that has come out of this. So I know for me now, I appreciate the people in my life so much more because I can see where I have been able to devote more time to those relationships.
Marsha, I thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show. The last question that I have of you is do you have any final asks or something you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, I guess I'd have to say, to sum it up, we in the credit union industry, we've been entrusted and have the confidence of our memberships. And my ask would be that we remember and honor that gift each and every day, and never lose your sense of humor. I think you have to have that in spite of everything else that may be going on around you to keep moving forward.
Well, that is the perfect way to wrap up the show. We will link to everything we talked about today in the show notes. If people have additional questions for you, and my guess is they're going to, what's the best way to get a hold of you? LinkedIn, Twitter machine, email?
LinkedIn or email.
All right. We will link to your LinkedIn profile also. Thank you again, Marsha, for taking the time today. I greatly appreciate it. I hope you have a fantastic day, and please stay healthy, my friend.
Thank you so much. Enjoyed speaking with you. You have a great day.
Before we go, I would like to thank you all for listening. We wouldn't be able to do what we do without your support. And once again, thank Marsha for taking the time out of her busy schedule and share those experiences with all of us. And a big thank you to our sponsor, PSCU. Our friends over at PSCU have been a longtime partner and supporter of CUInsight. And so just please make sure you click on their link in the show notes, give them some love, see everything amazing they have going on to help credit unions around the country. Also, we're on all the podcast players out there. Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, you name it, Pandora. We're there. We would appreciate if you would subscribe and leave us a 5-star rating, maybe even a review on the old Apple podcast machine. It does help us spread the credit union love and the visibility of the show. If you don't think we're worth the 5 stars, forget that I ever asked, and just reach out to me directly. Let me know where we can improve. And don't forget about the CUInsight Experience podcast book list. Needing some stimulation for the mind? We've got you covered. Get your next book recommendation from the guests on our show. Thank you all again for listening. Have an amazing day, and please stay healthy, friends.